Thank you for accepting our interview, Mr. Luke. First of all, some European leaders have increasingly discussed the need for greater strategic autonomy. Is NATO prepared for a future in which Europe will have to assume much greater responsibility if the US scales back its commitment?
Well, I think it's important that Europeans invest more on defense. Nobody would deny this. But I think Europeans need to be careful when they talk about things like strategic autonomy. The reality is North America and Europe are too closely linked economically. We're too important for each other to think that one side can go alone. So yes, Americans are frustrated with Europeans not spending enough on defense. Europeans are frustrated by some of the actions taken by the Trump administration, but we must overcome this and to find a way to work together to make sure that we have a strong alliance, a strong NATO, and a strong transatlantic community.
So Turkey has significantly expanded its defense industry in recent years, as you know. How does NATO plan to integrate the capabilities of the allies, such as Turkey, into the alliance long-term defense planning?
Well, Turkey is leading by example, and many other NATO members should follow what Turkey is doing. The Secretary General has been very clear in recent weeks, highlighting what Ankara is doing with its defense industry. It's world-beating. Everyone is looking at what the Turkish defense industry is doing. But this is a question also for the European Union, not just NATO. Because the European Union is talking about playing a bigger role on defense issues, especially the defense industrial base. Yet they don't want to include countries like the UK or Turkey to be involved. And this is why, going back to the first question, strategic autonomy is impossible unless you include all the actors. We all have to be together. And in the context of defense industry, Turkey is a leader and should be encouraged.
So will NATO continue its eastward enlargement policy, and how do you respond to Russia's claim that its expansions threat its security and justify its military actions?
Well, NATO enlargement does not justify NATO or Russian military action. In the same way, if I wear a nice watch and I walk down the street, I'm not justifying someone mugging me or attacking me to take it. NATO is an organization of 32 democracies, and all countries have to decide if they want to bring in an additional member. NATO doesn't force any country to join. It's up to that country to decide. So this is a lot different from the Russian approach, where they, in the case of Ukraine or Georgia, they will invade to prevent a country from being able to join NATO. Because Russia has perfected this formula to keep countries out of the Euro-Atlantic community. They invade and then partially occupy. And then that stops enlargement, whether it's NATO or the European Union. But I think finally, and most fundamentally, enlargement is enshrined in NATO's founding document. Article 10 of the 1949 treaty says that any European country that meets the criteria can join the alliance. So it's important that NATO's doors open. This doesn't mean there'll be guaranteed enlargement, but the door has to be open for new members if the alliance chooses.
So NATO leaders are expected to reaffirm long-term military support for Ukraine. Do you expect the alliance to increase its support further?
I don't know so much about the alliance as an institution, but certainly many of the member states of the alliance will be continuing their support for Ukraine. You know, publicly here we're talking about burden sharing and the defense industry and increasing defense spending, but privately Ukraine will be the issue that's discussed. This is the biggest security crisis in Europe since the Second World War. This is what's dominating much of the discussion here privately and understandably. So I think if maybe NATO won't play a role, but the member states will certainly have a role to play to help Ukraine.
Thank you very much for your valuable responses, Mr. Luke.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.